Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. If you're about to start a building project or even just a do-it-yourself project around your house, turn first to A.G. Hines Company. They have not only the best building materials, they've been supplying the top contractors in East Tennessee for, well, 100 years, literally. But they also have more of the materials you need right now. So many of, we know about the supply lines in this country. They have the connections, they have the ties. I guarantee you, if you go to one of these other stores, one of these other big name places, the national brands, they're not getting everything. They're divvying that out to all their other national, you know, if somebody in Topeka has the 2x4 that you need, go to A.G. Hines Company. They got what you need. Trust me on that. A.G. Hines Company right in downtown Knoxville. All right, let me welcome in the final member of today's panel from GoVols247.com, Ryan Callahan, back with us. Ryan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Good to see you. Now let's go to a graphic. Let's take a look at the offensive and defensive linemen for Tennessee and discuss just whether or not we think they have the horses to, and I'll say fourth in the East, because that would be a heck of a thing. If you can jump over everybody to get to fourth in the East, I think that'd be a good year for you this year. Cade Mays, Darnell Wright, Dane Davis, and Crawford there on the offensive tackle slot at guard, Carvin, Spraggins, Lampley, Harris. Cooper Mays, Ball, Lane are your center group, so that's your offensive line. Then you see the defensive line. I just lumped everybody together because they're going to be moving around a lot back there. In terms of talent, in terms of depth, do you feel good about where they are on the line of scrimmage right now?
I like the defensive line group okay. I think considering you're going to be in a lot of four-man fronts where those outside linebackers, the Tyler Barons, the Roman Harrisons, Byron Youngs are going to be lining up as defensive ends, I think you've got
Which is why I listed them there.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got these guys that are going to be playing that elephant, if you will, they're going back and forth.
So I like that group okay, and I think the additions of the transfers were really important to get Caleb Tremblay and Dejon Terry. That was a big deal. I'm a little more worried about the offensive line group. I think that's the concern now. Without that tackle depth now, I think that's a group that's fairly thin. And so you see injuries there every year. Last year they're playing extra guys because they had enough depth. They're lining them up as extra tight ends. This year you don't have that kind of depth. So I think there's a concern at guard and at tackle, honestly, about what they would do. They've got 6 or 7 I think they can really count on. Beyond that, it's freshmen and really unproven guys.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, I would just replay, if we could, what Ryan said, and I agree with all of it. The departures of Wanya Morris, Jameer Johnson, then injury with Kayron Calvert leaves a real question of where your depth is at tackle. So overall numbers on the offensive line is a question. So then what if you deal with injuries, which you always expect to during a season in the SEC? I don't know how many guys I would say, okay, he could be an all-SEC player on the defensive line, but a number of guys that you can rotate, that's where you feel comfortable on the defensive side.
And Jameer Johnson's a guy that just kind of gets forgotten. Everyone talks about Wanya Morris, and you look at the Calvert injury. I've had people tell me, well, he wasn't going to start anyway. Yeah, in week 1. Yeah. But by week 3, if everybody else is hurt in front of him, he might be starting. You don't like losing that depth, but Jameer Johnson was a guy who played quite a bit.
And transferred to a top 10 team, Texas A&M.
Yeah, and you expect him to play down there. Vince, your thoughts on the line? Do you like where Tennessee is at this point?
Well, on a little bit better on defense, and I do think it was encouraging what we saw from that first scrimmage with the defense. And I feel better about the coaching on that side of the ball as well. Glenn Ellerbe is a little bit more of a to be determined and an unknown. His coaching style is very different than Will Friend. That should be a positive in resonating with those guys. It sounds like it is, but they need to improve from what they have before. The D-line, I think Ronnie Garner, and I asked Latrell Bumpus about this yesterday, very similar to Tracy Rocker, who got a whole lot out of an undermanned group 2 years ago.
And it's a good thing they ran him off because of it. Right. It was one of Pruitt's best moves.
And so I think that side of the ball is a positive, especially when you do group those defensive ends, the Leos and all that in that group. The offensive line depth is so over discussed, and they have bodies they have depth in numbers in 16 bodies, but they don't have the quality there. I think they only go 6 or 7. 7 maybe with Calbert. I mean, really the only guy you have there is Dane Davis. And when they start talking about moving guys as backups, Carvin would move to center, and you got to get your best 5 out there. That tells me you don't have very many more than your best 5 when you have to move so many guys around.
Right, and if this team makes it through 12-game season, 8 of those in SEC competition, and they only need 7 linemen, they'll have had a very lucky year in terms of injuries. So that is, and the other thing, and I'm having to fight on this offensive line thing, and we talked about it a little bit in between segments here. It has been so long since Tennessee has had an offensive line where you said, yeah, I feel good about that. Now, many off seasons, the talk has been, oh, the offensive line will be great this year.
Last year.
Yeah, yes. Well, you got Drew Richmond. Well, you got Trey Smith. Well, you've got Wanya Morris, Darnell Wright. You got 5 stars. You got something, whether it's a blood clot for Trey Smith or Darnell Wright just never living up to the hype yet. I mean, he's right now he's competing with a former walk-on for the spot at left tackle. They just haven't had the actual production match the potential in years. What are we going back, a decade? I mean, well, I wouldn't say that far. You'd have to go back to when you had, and even then you had Dobbs and Kamara and Hurd were special. But in terms of a really good line that you kind of appreciated, that would be as close as you could come. And there were still times where Hurd was dancing around guys in the backfield. So you may go back a decade, actually, the more I think about it, since you've had a line that you felt, okay, put that in the strengths. That's not a concern. We're worried about these other things. And I'm trying hard not to let that color my view going into this season. But I just feel it's kind of a, you said replay what he's saying. I'm afraid this is going to be a replay of so many years prior where we're sitting here at the end of the year going, well, the offensive line stunk.
Well, it's like Vince also talking about, well, if there's a guy that goes down like Cooper Mays, if he were to go down, which obviously you don't hope, but at center, and you have to move a guy around. How many conversations have we had about guys moving from guard to tackle, tackle to guard, whatever, right side to left side, and they have no chemistry, and it ends up blowing up the offensive line for the season, and here we are having that potential conversation now.
That's a great point.
And one other factor, Jimmy Hyams had asked the coaches about this, and I think it was Alex Golesh, and he really give an answer, is sometimes with the pace of the offense, you might be able to mask some issues and lack of dominance on that offensive line. And I think that's a byproduct of this high-paced, high-tempo offense. So there's the hope of that, and then also that guys get better. Josh Heupel mentioned that Darnell Wright was a natural at left tackle, and that he thinks he has a chance to be an elite pass blocker. So Caden Mays lost weight. So you have to hope that the 7 guys that you roll with beyond that depth can be better, and then hope you get lucky with the help.
You just said the word hope an awful lot,
right.
And I think that's where you are when it comes to the offensive line. Hope, defensive line, you got a lot of guys who, you've seen them play at a SEC level, not an all-star level by any stretch, but you've seen guys who you think can contribute, and you're counting on Rodney Garner with his veteran leadership to be able to coax something out of them. But I'm more worried about that offensive line than I am the defense.
Yeah, the defensive line progression in 2019 was one of the positive stories, and a lot of those guys are still there. Maybe they can do it again.
You have experience in that group. I will say the defensive line or the offensive line, there's at least, I like, there are reasons to be somewhat optimistic about that group. Again, Darnell Wright and Cade Mays are slimmer. I like quite a bit, actually, Jerome Carvin and Javonte Spraggins at guard. So maybe that group does work out, but there's a real chance, as we were talking about, you're depending on someone like R.J. Perry or Jeremiah Crawford or William Parker to play some snaps this year. That's not an ideal situation because they haven't played before.
Yeah, and maybe, as Josh alluded to, maybe you flip it the other way, and maybe this group does have great chemistry that these previous lines haven't been able to show because they've had guys in and out of the lineup. Maybe this crew can develop a chemistry that makes the whole better than the parts, if you will. All right, when we come back, let's talk about talent overall. It used to be that Tennessee fans, this time of year, you'd sit there and go, ooh, the watch lists are coming out. The watch lists are coming out. Well, now there's really only one watch list that's listening Vols, and I'm afraid that could be a warning about our talent. Let's discuss that when we come back.